How do you share embarrassing information attractively? I work with a wide range of clients, women all around the world, and many of you come to me with a specific thing about yourself that you believe makes you less. You're holding some shame or embarrassment about something, and you're worried that it'll come out on a first or second date, or perhaps you want it to come out on a first or second date, but you don't know how to bring it up without seeming insecure or making things awkward. Now, this is normal. We all have things like this that we say, oh, this is not the most attractive part of myself. How do I bring this up? Sometimes it's because we've bought into a stereotype about the thing. Other times it's because life just taught us it was a bad part of ourselves and we haven't healed it yet. Either way, if the information is embarrassing to you, how do you tackle it on a date and still keep the guy's interest, still be high value in his eyes? Welcome to the channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's dive in today on how to do this. Now, to begin, there's two types of traits or information that these aspects of personality fall into. There's the traits that will come up on a first date, most likely because the guy asks a relatively mundane question and you want to know how to answer that question because the truth feels a little embarrassing to you. And then there's the stuff that's not likely to come up on a first date, but probably should, and you want to be able to bring it up without it seeming awkward or insecure. So let me give you a couple of examples from both categories. A typical question on a first date might be, hey, tell me about your family. If both your parents are in jail, that's kind of a difficult question. A typical question on a first date might be, hey, what do you do for work? If you are feeling a bit embarrassed because you've been out of work for 15 years, that's a shitty question to take. If you are a mother to 2 or 3 different kids to different fathers, you might be nervous about the question of, hey, tell me about the kid's dad. And you feel a bit of shame about explaining, actually, there's 3 dads. Now, again, I'm not saying that thing is shameful, but if you've bought into that, then that's the reality for you. So that's the first category. It's things that realistically will probably come up on the date and how to deal with them. The second category is things that probably won't come up on a date, but you kind of want to bring them up, or they should because they're important. Let's say, for example, that you have an STD. HIV, herpes, something like that, and you know at some point you need to bring that up. Perhaps there is a physical thing that you want to bring up, but it can't be seen with the naked eye. For example, I had a client who had a scar that ran from her knee, pretty big scar that ran from her knee up to the bottom of her rib cage, and it's not a thing that you can see with clothes on, but it's important before the clothes come off. So she wanted to bring it up at some point. Perhaps there's a disability there or a disease that can't be seen with the naked eye. Or maybe, for example, you're a virgin or you don't have a lot of experience and it's not really something you show up on a first date and say, but it's probably something your first date should know. So we've got these two categories of things. How do we deal with them and how do we make these conversations actually be attractive? All right. Let's dive in. So for the first category, this is things that are probably going to come up. These are the ones you really want to make sure you tackle because there's not really any avoiding them without seeming sketchy or insecure. I use a traffic light system with clients to deal with these. That's red, orange, and green. Let me explain what each of these are. Red light, as you might expect, is in a socially intelligent way, moving the person away from the topic. Now, you want to do this without showing shame and without looking like you're being avoided, but while still setting the boundary. So let's say, for example, your father's in jail and a man asks you, hey, tell me a little bit about your dad. What's he like? It's not something you're super comfortable talking about yet. You're not feeling that confidence yet. You would say, a red light would be, hey, yeah, I'm super happy to talk about that. It's just something that I probably feel more comfortable talking to you about, maybe on like a 3rd or a 4th date. How does that sound? So we want to confidently lean forward while setting the boundary without seeming insecure about it. Oh, tell me about your dad. Happy to talk about that. I guess I feel a little uncertain talking about it on a first date. What about 3rd or 4th date? We talk about it then. Is that okay? Okay, sure. Tell me about your family. So you kind of stack forward to a new topic from there. So that's a red light. A red light is a socially confident way of removing the topic without making it seem shameful or bad. Let's take another example. Hey, you said you haven't worked for a while. How come you haven't worked? Totally happy to talk about that. It's just kind of a long story and I maybe feel a little insecure about it. So would it be okay if we kick that forward to a 3rd or a 4th date? Just a little while. Is that all right? The person 9 times out of 10 is going to respect that boundary. Now, the orange light is an interesting one. And the orange light is where you really just own that you have some shame or embarrassment around it. You really open your heart. The beauty of the orange is that it's your truth. It's absolutely true. You say, hey, do you really want to know? I actually feel kind of insecure about the answer, but I can share it with you if you would really like to know. I guess it's a little embarrassing for me. So I haven't actually been working for 15 years. And, the truth is I don't like admitting it because I guess I worry that I'll be perceived as a little bit lower value, or I get scared that, I'm going to be judged on this. But yeah, that is kind of my truth. Now, the thing about orange, as you might have just guessed from me doing that, is you wouldn't typically use it on a first or second date. Orange is for someone where there's established trust and rapport. Okay, that's very important, because what you don't want is you don't want to use an orange where you open your heart and then it gets trounced on. Because what's going to happen then is you're going to feel even more shame about that thing, and it's going to be even harder for you to talk about it later. So orange is very important for healing and for revealing yourself and for opening yourself up about whatever it is that you feel a little bit of shame over. Orange is also what you would use in a therapy setting, when you're really opening your heart. But a therapy setting is a safe space. So you want to be really careful using an orange light with someone new, because you don't know what that person's reaction will be. And if it's negative, it'll make the shame worse. So I would advise staying away from an orange in a first, second date situation. Only when you really trust someone do you use an orange. Now, green is the other one that you can do to make yourself seem really attractive. So green light is based on the idea, if you've ever heard of the concept of post-traumatic growth. So post-traumatic growth is like, if you can imagine a Nike tick, it's the idea that we go down when a trauma happens, but we actually bounce back up. And if enough time has passed since something negative has happened, then what you'll notice is that the trauma can shoot you back up. It's how someone makes lemonade out of lemons, as they say. So let's say, for example, someone asks you, tell me about your parents, and your parents are in jail and you feel some shame over that. The way to frame it is you would say, actually, do you really want to hear? It's something I used to feel insecure about, but I'm happy to share. The person will lean in and be curious and say, yeah. And you say, yeah, for a long time, I never wanted to talk about my parents or my father, whatever, because I felt shame around telling the story. And it's funny, growing up, it was a very challenging time for me, and you give context, blah, blah, blah. And for the longest time, I wouldn't talk about my parents because I thought that my parents, were a reflection on me, and that I couldn't have, I was in their shadow. But after a long time, I realized that actually my parents, being the way they are, forced me to do the work on myself. It forced me to grow. It forced me to look at my own trauma, and it forced me to not identify with them and to be my own person. So for a long time, I really hid the fact that my dad's in jail, and I just would not tell anyone. But actually, because of my dad being in jail, it really forced me to do so much self-work and introspection and figure out who I am and where I'm going and what my goals are and what's important to me and how to set boundaries. And all these amazing things happened after about 10 years when I realized, hey, actually, I can take kind of my power back from this situation and use it as a growth slingshot to be a better human in the future. So that's a very quick example of post-traumatic growth. It's something bad happened to me. I felt a lot of shame over it. And then because of that, I rebounded and became a better human. If you can turn the things that you're feeling some shame or embarrassment over into a story of post-traumatic growth, when you see how they might have benefited you in some way, you can turn that narrative around, and it'll make telling something very negative or with some shame seem very attractive in the eyes of your date. So red, yellow, green. If you don't want to talk about the thing, get good at red lights. If you feel extremely comfortable with the person and you've known them well and you think they're a safe person to share with, orange light, vulnerable, is a good option. If you want to show the highest level of attractiveness possible and confidence, and you really do start to feel healed inside from the event that occurred, a green light is the best way to present the information. Now, on the flip side, what if you've got one of these topics that doesn't come up a lot? Let's say that you are a virgin, and that might surprise your dates because let's say you're over 35 and that's something you feel a little shy talking about. Or another one, maybe you have an STI, or like I said, a physical ailment that's not obvious to the naked eye. How do you bring that stuff up without it seeming weird, contrived, or manufactured? Well, I find the best way to do this is to ask a question that you will then answer back after the guy has finished answering. So frame the question as something fairly positive, but something that can be answered with a lot of introspection. So good examples of this would be, you might ask the guy, tell me, what's one of the biggest learnings you've had in your life? Maybe what's one of the biggest learnings you've had from your last relationship? You could ask him, what's something you're really grateful for? You could ask him, what's something that was hard for you at the time, but which is now a blessing in your life? Do you see how I'm framing questions so that after he's answered and shared some of his values, which will be interesting to hear anyway, what's often going to happen is the guy's going to say, well, what about you? And that's your opportunity to talk about the thing that's vulnerable for you. He says, hey, what about you? And you say, well, I mean, I can share the vulnerable one, or I can share the superficial one. Which one do you want to hear? Or do you want the surface level one, or do you want the deep one? Most of the time, the guy's going to say the deep one. And that's when you have an opportunity to tell your green light story about the thing that you feel embarrassment over. So let's say, for example, you ask the guy, what's one of your biggest learnings? Blah, blah, blah. He says, whatever. And then he says, what about you? You say back to him, well, do you want the one I tell most people, or do you want the more honest and slightly vulnerable one? He says, oh, okay, I'll take the more honest and slightly vulnerable one. You say, well, it's funny. One of my biggest learnings was actually many years ago. I had a partner at the time. I thought things were going well. But unfortunately, this is about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, what I didn't know was behind my back, he had got cheeky with someone else. Now, I was very young at the time, or I was much younger at the time. It only happened once. And as soon as I learned that it happened, I let him go. Looking back on that relationship, I learned a lot from it. That's a story for another day. Anyway, after letting him go, I thought everything was good. I thought I made a good decision, let him go. Got some bad news at the doctor. Herpes positive. I was completely floored. I thought never again will any man want me. I thought never again am I going to have an option in who I want to date. I cried and cried and cried for months. My self-esteem was in the toilet, and I hid myself away. And you know what? For a long time, I just kind of leaned back off that. I actually kind of went on a pretty anti-men phase and was just angry at life. And then, one day I woke up and it was just, I think I heard a story on the news, and it was about how this child survived this fire, but was horribly scarred from it. And I felt so bad for this kid, this story that happened. And I just thought, compared to, what I went through, where I'm still healthy, I'm still good. Yes, I have a skin condition, but which can't actually hurt anyone. And I started realizing that, I need to figure out how to be grateful for life and how to have this empower me instead of being a victim to it to the rest of my life. And so I made the decision that, okay, what if this was something that could work for me rather than against me? And that was when I decided that from now on, I'm going to see my condition, having herpes, as a way to filter men rather than as a way to be inadequate in some way. And you know what? When I actually started getting my confidence back and putting myself out there, I found the guys that liked me either didn't care, or at worst, they wanted to learn a few facts just to understand it first. And I found that the guys that were just superficial and just asked for sex, or just in it for sex, or were not really into me, they just flooded away. And weirdly enough, I've never had an issue dating really great men since then. I've never had anyone catch it from me, which is a bonus as well. And I think it's just been a real huge learning lesson in my life to go, oh yeah, no, I do have value. Actually, I can have this condition, and you know what? It's actually me and my personality and my vibrancy and all those beautiful things I bring. That doesn't mean anything to the right person. So that's one of my biggest learnings. So do you see what I did there? I told a green light story about the thing that the person felt embarrassed about, which the example I used was herpes, but you can use in that case any example. We could use the scar that runs from, knee to bottom of rib cage. We could use the chronic condition. We can use anything at all, but you can tell that green light story, basing it off the question you just asked the guy when he reflects it back. And now we have a post-traumatic growth story, which is a very attractive way to present information. So I hope that helps. If you want more help with this, book a one-to-one call. I can help you meet a guy. I can help things with the guy that you're already with. Anything you need at all, book a one-to-one call. The link is in the description. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button with the little bell, give a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. Do you have something that you've used this with, or is this concept familiar to you? Is this helpful for you? I'd love to hear from you. Leave that in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video very soon.